the American mystery that defied science and logic. I first heard about it in whispers, fragments of conversations that never quite made sense, dismissed by everyone who encountered them as mistakes, exaggerations, or rural superstition. But when I arrived in West Hollow, a small town tucked between the Appalachian Hills, I realized something more profound was at work. Something no amount of logic could touch. West Hollow looked like any other American town. Red brick streets, a defunct train station, a single gas station that stayed open too late, the smell of damp earth after rain. But the air had a peculiar quality, dense, heavy, as if the town itself were waiting, watching, breathing. It greeted me like a subtle warning I hadn't yet learned to understand. I was there to investigate reports of disappearances. Not the usual missing teens or wandering drunks type, this was different. People vanished, and the evidence of their existence seemed to dissolve in ways that confounded both logic and science. Photographs blurred, video footage glitched in patterns that defied technical explanation, and time, witnesses claimed, didn't behave normally around the missing. The first case I reviewed was that of Henry Collins, a 62-year-old retired mechanic. He'd gone out on a foggy evening to check on a neighbor's generator and simply wasn't there the next morning. His truck remained in the driveway, untouched, engine cold, keys in the ignition, but no trace of him. The town claimed he'd wandered off, gotten lost. But the neighbors' statements were inconsistent. Some swore they'd seen him leaving at dusk. Some insisted it had been after midnight. No one agreed on when he disappeared, and no one agreed on what the fog looked like that night. I spent the first 2 nights walking the streets, listening. The town was quiet beyond normal small-town quiet, and every shadow seemed to cling to me a little longer than it should. On the 3rd night, I noticed it, an almost imperceptible vibration in the air, like the subtle thrum of something enormous moving just out of sight. The fog rolled in early, settling over the town like a blanket, muffling sound, blurring the edges of buildings and trees. Every missing person had some connection to the town's periphery. The old train tracks, the abandoned mills, the dense forests that hemmed in the town from every side. And everyone described a sensation in those areas, a sense of being observed, a subtle temporal distortion. Days could feel like hours, or hours could stretch unnaturally long. I interviewed the townspeople. Most were reluctant to speak, glancing nervously out windows and down empty streets, as if the very act of telling someone might summon the thing again. A waitress at the diner handed me a cup of coffee without looking me in the eyes and whispered, "They don't like questions. Who doesn't?" I asked, voice low. She didn't answer. That night, I stayed in the old Johnson farmhouse at the edge of town, a place long abandoned, but structurally sound. The air was cold, even with the heater on, and the floorboards groaned under the weight of something unseen. Around midnight, the hairs on my arms stood on end. I felt it before I saw it, a presence, subtle at first, then insistent, pressing against the walls and the floor. It was a sensation of being watched, measured, examined not with eyes, but with some intelligence that I couldn't comprehend. I began recording everything. Not just audio or video, but notes on temperature shifts, barometric pressure, electromagnetic readings, anything that might explain the phenomenon. And yet, each measurement contradicted the next. Thermometers fluctuated wildly, compasses spun, even digital clocks refused to hold time consistently. Logic was failing in West Hollow. The next disappearance was young Emily Carter, 16 years old. She had gone to fetch water from the town well, something she did daily, and never returned. Her parents were frantic, but when I arrived at the well, I found something impossible. The water level was frozen like glass, reflecting the clouds and sky in perfect stillness, despite the wind. There were footprints leading to the well, but none leading away. And when I peered into the water, I could swear I saw her reflection, staring back at me even though she wasn't there. I spent days compiling accounts, cross-referencing details, and visiting every reported site. The patterns became more disturbing. Each disappearance corresponded with a subtle change in the environment, a flicker of shadow, a shift in sound, the feeling that the world had tilted slightly on its axis. People's memories were unreliable in West Hollow. Witnesses contradicted themselves, recollections warped after brief exposure to these areas. Then I found the cabin. Hidden in the forest beyond the train tracks, it was old, built from timber that had grown gnarled with age. There was no sign of recent habitation, yet the air around it felt alive. I hesitated at the threshold, recording every second. Inside, the room was empty, save for dust-covered furniture and the table. On the table was a notebook, yellowed with age, and the words inside written in a hand that was neither neat nor entirely legible described events that mirrored the disappearances, yet the dates predated any modern record. It chronicled time bending, people vanishing, and something observing from the shadows. The author claimed the entity was not of the world, but of the edges of the world. I tried rational explanations, mass hysteria, optical illusions, rare environmental phenomena, but every theory collapsed under the weight of the evidence. And then the town began to change around me. Streetlights flickered in patterns that formed shapes I couldn't recognize. Fog thickened in patches, then withdrew, leaving trails that seemed deliberate. I noticed residents moving in odd rhythms, their expressions blank, distant. Some would stare at nothing for minutes, then vanish from my sight only to reappear elsewhere without explanation. It was as if West Hollow itself was folding reality in ways I could not understand. One evening, I traced the railroad tracks further than anyone I had spoken to. The fog swallowed me whole. When it cleared, I saw a figure in the distance, tall, featureless, yet unmistakably human in shape. I called out, but it didn't respond. As I approached, it vanished. The air felt heavier, the ground subtly vibrating. And then I realized I could no longer trust my own perception of time. My watch ran backwards. My notebook had entries I hadn't written. The forest seemed endless, looping in ways that made no sense, as if reality itself was rehearsing a nightmare I could not wake from. I returned to town, but West Hollow wasn't the same. Buildings were shifted, streets unfamiliar. People I had spoken to earlier denied ever seeing me. My presence was questioned. I became the anomaly. And the notebook, the one from the cabin, I found it on my doorstep, open to a page I had no memory of writing. The observer comes for those who seek the truth. Logic bends. Memory fails. Only the edges remain. I left immediately, drove hours away, but even now I feel it lingering in my periphery. Shadows that shouldn't exist brush the corner of my vision. Time stretches strangely, and sometimes late at night I hear the subtle hum of that presence, just outside my window, in the spaces between moments, reminding me that West Hollow did not release me. I don't know if it is still observing me or if I carry its attention within myself. Science cannot explain it. Logic cannot contain it. And I suspect that no one who truly understands West Hollow ever escapes completely. So, if you ever hear about a town tucked between the hills, where people vanish, where time and memory twist, and where even photographs seem to lie, consider that story carefully. The American mystery is still out there. It defies explanation. It defies reason. It may even be waiting for you to notice it. If you're still here, stay with me, subscribe. After leaving West Hollow, I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. I told myself it was over, that the town's grip was gone, that the anomalies had been contained to that place. But reality proved stubborn. It started subtly at first. Small distortions in my apartment, objects slightly out of place, shadows that didn't correspond to any light source, the faint, rhythmic hum of something just beyond perception. I chalked it up to fatigue, lingering paranoia. But then the mail arrived. Inside was a letter, typed on a machine I didn't recognize. No return address, only one sentence. You left too soon. We were not finished. I felt the air around me thicken. My apartment, once familiar and safe, now seemed alien, its corners deeper, its shadows darker. I began documenting again, recording every anomaly, every fleeting sensation, as if by cataloging them, I could maintain control. But control was slipping. Sleep became impossible. Nights stretched into unending cycles. Every time I closed my eyes, West Hollow replayed in fragments. The fog rolling like water, the figure in the forest, the metallic tang in the air. And in those dreams, or were they dreams, I could feel the observer moving closer, learning the rhythm of my mind, my fears, my patterns. Then the phone calls began. No one spoke. Just silence, static, and sometimes beneath it all, a faint voice repeating, "You should not have left." I attempted to leave town again, to drive hundreds of miles away, but the route seemed to warp. Roads I knew as straight became convoluted, looping back into familiar territory I had just left. Gas stations, diners, and forests I didn't recognize appeared as if drawn from memory rather than geography. I began to understand the terrifying truth. West Hollow, or whatever force emanated from it, was not bound to geography. It had followed me. Documents I had collected began to change. Notes I was certain I had written shifted under my eyes. Entries that once described specific dates and events now contained phrases I didn't remember typing. Time is a circle. We are all edges. I reached out to colleagues, other investigators, even academics specializing in anomalous phenomena. But every call, every email was met with either confusion or dismissal, and occasionally a hint of fear in their voices, as if they knew more than they would admit. One night, a prominent researcher told me, voice trembling, West Hollow isn't just a town, it's a pattern. And patterns have a way of spreading. I stopped trusting conventional time entirely. Watches, phones, clocks, they all behaved inconsistently. One night, I experienced a moment where I lived 2 hours in what felt like 2 minutes. On another occasion, a day passed in what felt like an instant. Memory no longer aligned with reality. I began seeing it more clearly, the figure. No longer distant, no longer featureless. It appeared at the edge of rooms, in reflections, in shadows that bent unnaturally. And then it started appearing in photographs I hadn't taken, images of my own apartment, my street, my life, but with subtle distortions. Furniture shifted, walls warped, and sometimes, just sometimes, I saw my own face standing somewhere I wasn't. I realized, horrifyingly, that leaving West Hollow hadn't freed me. I had become part of it, an extension of the anomaly. Its observer had tracked me, folded reality around me, and now I was enmeshed in the same pattern that had claimed Henry Collins, Emily Carter, and so many others. I wanted to tell someone to warn the world, but words seemed inadequate. The more I tried to explain, the more distant and distorted reality became. People looked at me strangely, avoided me. Some nights, I'd wake up to find my own handwriting, scrawled in places I didn't remember writing. Maps of impossible locations, diagrams that didn't correspond to any known geography. And yet, there were moments of clarity horrifying in their lucidity. I could feel the edges of West Hollow expanding, reaching out, testing limits, probing for more observers. I knew then that no one who investigates the town is ever truly safe. Even distance, even fleeing, does not sever its influence. One night, as I stared at a map of the Appalachian region, I realized something. The disappearances, the anomalies, the distortions, they were forming a grid, a network, a lattice of impossibility. It was a geometry of fear, drawn invisibly across the American landscape. And in that lattice, West Hollow was not an isolated anomaly, it was a nexus. I don't know how much time has passed. Days, weeks, years, the lines between moments blur. But I know one thing with certainty, if you chase the truth too deeply, if you insist on looking for the unexplainable, West Hollow, or whatever it represents, will find you. It follows patterns. It thrives on observation, and it waits for the next investigator to notice it. I write this now, aware that my own hands may not belong entirely to me. The observer is patient, it watches, and it records. If you ever encounter reports of impossible events, of time anomalies, of places that do not seem real, consider that some mysteries do not want to be solved. Some patterns are living, and some towns, no matter how far removed, will reach across the miles to make you a part of them. If you're still here, stay with me. Subscribe.